Hello again. Welcome. I'm glad you found me on my website, bishopbatescec.org. And if you found me on YouTube, try to go over there, subscribe, and then you'll get notified of these reflections of, like I said, we're on this thing I call a cruise to Ephesus. And we're reflecting on, particularly today, on Ephesians 2, verses 9 through 10. In the early 1980s, I mean really early, maybe 1981 or 82, I was just ordained and serving a small church in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. I attended the Billy Graham Pastor School that was connected with the Billy Graham Crusade that was about to happen later that year in Boston, not far from where I was serving. And so a friend, a fellow pastor and priest, we went to seminary together, went to this pastor school together. In fact, we went to the crusade together. My church took part in the crusade, and we took a bus in almost every night with friends and participated fully as we could. All the training that took place, many of the people in my church were counselors. And as part of the pastor team, I also had to go to the counselor school and be there for the crusades, to go down. When people came forward, I would go down as a pastor along with others and work with the lay teams, assisting them if there was a difficult situation that occurred. So we had to have a working knowledge of what the counselors were doing. When somebody came forward, what was the interaction for between the counselor and the person. And when every person who came forward, when Dr. Graham made the invitation to receive Christ, was given a booklet. They were great booklets. I lost mine. I don't know if there's no longer a Billy Graham Crusade, so they're historic documents. But they were a booklet that helped the person in the first step of becoming a Christian. And part of the booklet was to explain what happened, and they were given Bible verses to support the explanation. They pretty well based on what they call the Romans Road or the Romans Way. And speaking in your mouth and confessing with your heart. And then there was guidance on what to do next. Prayer, reading scripture, getting in a small group, finding a Bible-believing church. And there were memory verses. Memory verses are verses in the Bible, mostly in the New Testament, which you memorize so they become part of you. And I think if this booklet was like 7 weeks long, there would be 7 memory verses. There's one for each step, and then you were obviously to continue on your way. And the first one was from Ephesians 2, verse 8. By grace you have been saved through faith. This is not from yourself, it is a gift of God. By grace you have been saved through faith. This is not from yourself, it is a gift of God. I was sitting one day trying to address the question in my head, the question people are asked you, or you ask them sometimes, when were you saved? As you enter the world of American evangelicalism, the issue of salvation, or when were you saved, comes down to meaning an event. And that event will be called a testimony or a witness. And you'll have a date and you'll have a time. And it'll be that date or that time when various phrases are used to get answered. I was born again, or I accepted Jesus, or I gave and surrendered my life to Christ on, or I was saved on this particular date. So I was born again on July 3rd, or I was saved on July 3rd, meaning what this meaning is I had this relationship, this moment in which I accepted what Christ did on the cross for my salvation. I think, and that's important. I think the best definition, though, of evangelism was given by a British archbishop named William Temple in the days he served during World War II as the Archbishop of Canterbury. And he said, let me read this, "To evangelize is to so present Jesus Christ in the power of the Holy Spirit that men and women shall come," here, listen to this, "to put their faith in God through him, to accept him as their Savior, and to serve him as their King in the fellowship of his church." That's such a rich definition. To present Jesus Christ, in other words, we do the presenting of who Jesus is and what Jesus has done. But it's in the power of the Holy Spirit who drives home the point of trusting Christ. To trust what Jesus did and who he is. And behind it all is the love of the Father. I remember I started these blogs a long time ago, and I said, you got to understand, my number one big assumption is God is love. And so it's an action of love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. I believe there's a need today for evangelism in the church. As a CEC bishop in America, I think we need to revisit that fervently need to revisit that. We are evangelicals, and so we believe in that relationship, putting our trust in Jesus for everything, and living that out in the church. There needs to be opportunity for men and women, sometimes in church, to put their faith and trust in Jesus. Not like having a personal toothbrush. Once said, people say, do you have a personal savior? And I'll often cynically say, or sarcastically say, I have a personal toothbrush. I don't have a personal savior. I won't share my toothbrush. I'll share my Savior. And but what I mean by that is there's not an ownership of Jesus. There was a bumper sticker once that said, there was a commercial that was out years ago the phrase was "got milk," and then it was encouragement to buy milk, and then Christian group made a bumper sticker that said that "got Jesus," like we had ownership of him. But I know what they were trying to say, but that's not a really good way to say it. What has happened is God began a relationship that's intimate. Now, that word intimate, I'm not talking in a romantic way, but a closeness. We have this close relationship with Jesus where we are known by him, and that's really important, and know him. There's a passage in the gospel where Jesus says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. And then he talks about, you prophesied, you healed, you had words of knowledge, but I'll say, get away from me, I didn't know you. So knowing God's important, knowing him. More important than what we do comes out of who we know. And so knowing him, and it's really, my experience is knowing him more and more. The Jesus I know today is not different than, but it's more full, it's more complete. It's like any relationship I have, the longer you're in that relationship, the more you know of the other person, the more you love. Even though you know weaknesses, and even though they can, sometimes there's tension, it's a deeper love. Father Terry Fulham, who was a great teacher of the Bible and an Episcopal priest, once said, or he may have quoted someone, he said that the church has been sacramentalized but not evangelized. What he meant is that we knew all about the churchy stuff, but we didn't know Jesus. And the renewal or the revival that happened in the mainline and historic churches during the 1960s and the 90s had a great deal with evangelizing those who had already been baptized. Evangelizing those who were good church people in their various denominations. They would have defined themselves as Christian by But mostly by the denomination to which they belong. I'm an Episcopalian, I'm a Lutheran, I'm a Methodist, I'm a Presbyterian. And there were others. As the movement began to take place, as the Holy Spirit began to move, we began to say, I'm a Christian, or I'm a born-again Christian. We no longer defined ourselves by the denomination. In fact, we saw the denomination sometimes as a hindrance. And we looked and prayed for unity among believers. I believe one is a Christian because they're a follower of Jesus, not because they're a member of a denomination. And I mean by being a follower of Jesus is by participating in the life of Jesus through self-denial and picking up our cross. And a Christian does this because they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. In other words, Jesus is God. That Jesus is the light. Jesus is, more importantly, what he said he is. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Now, given that, all that little rambling that I just had, and if you listen, you know I ramble sometimes, brings us back to the topic of being saved. Am I saved? Are you saved? Now that word saved has several meanings, but it's translated from the Greek word sozo. And that is saved and healed or made whole or persevere, are all the meanings of that is deeper than just saved. John, in writing his gospel, says that Jesus came so that in believing in him we should not perish, but have eternal life. So somehow we're saved from perishing. Paul writes that the wages are the consequences of sin, which is missing the mark or being separated from God, is not death, not hell, but death, to be dead in our sins. We die, and we're all going to die because sin has brought death into the world, into our lives. That's important. God didn't create death. Our choices created death. And we fight against death because death is not a good thing, and God doesn't create bad things. We fight against death because we know we were not meant to die. We were created in the beginning to live forever. And so I tell people, don't embrace death or accept death. Jesus didn't embrace death or accept death. He conquered death. He destroyed death. He destroyed that annihilation that we so fear of death. I say there's all these reasons that we don't like death. There's a lot of them. The greatest fear of death is that of perishing, or the word annihilation. Now, annihilation isn't saying that there's hell, though we should fear that. It's saying that there's nothing. That the last breath is the shutdown of all the organs and ultimately the brain into a place of non-existence, except in the memory of those who are left behind. And that's only for a short time. That was defeated by Jesus. He said there's eternal life. See, but even then we fear death, or we don't like death, mostly because we don't know what we're going to. And it confronts what we don't know. But it also separates us from those we love. Because we're made to love and to be loved, and we found that in our spouses, our children, our grandchildren, our friends. We found it in other Christians, and we don't want to give it up. Because of God's love for us, God became human, and that through believing in him, it says we will not perish, but we know that we will continue. Maybe in something that's unimaginable right now, but we're told it's phenomenal, and a glorious eternity with and in Jesus and with the whole of the heavenly communion. Whether there is a conscious awareness of being separated from or unaware of God's presence and love after death, or whether there is annihilation, both are proponents and who are biblical and creedal Christians. What we all agree on, however, is that in Jesus, by Jesus entering into our humanity, and by his obedience to the voice and love of his Father, and by entering into death, he has defeated everything, including death itself, everything that separates us from God and gives us eternal life. We don't get eternal death. If we are saved, back to that concept, it is both from something and saved into something. We've been saved into eternity. But it's more than that. The word sozo means that we are saved from the consequence of sin and sins, which we do because we're sinners, and brought us but saved into the promise of life given in our participation and embracing of the cross and resurrection of Jesus. But it's also translated to be healed, to be made whole, to be made complete, or to be rescued. As a child of the 60s, I was not sure about sin. I was aware somehow of sin because I'd seen it and I knew I did it. I did sin. But in essence, sin was a list of things, and I did some of them, and I didn't do some of them. And there were items on the list that I didn't think were that bad. And therefore, if I committed it, it wasn't such a bad thing. It only didn't hurt anybody. And I had an excuse or an explanation, usually that we were all human. So if I did disobey the commandments, so they were those that my parents gave me mostly, and they backed it up with the commandments of God and the rules of the church. And God was on the side of my parents in all matters. As I got older and as I began a spiritual journey, I became more and more aware that I was wounded, I was broken, I was fractured. And I wasn't certain that I understood love, let alone that I was loved. And I got in touch with my resentments, my bitterness, my anger, my judgmentalism, and most of all, my pride and how that hurt other people. I was also aware of fear of never being loved, fear of not being able to love, of fear of life itself, fear of on all kinds of levels. And so as someone interested in practicing psychological counseling and actually healing others, I found my own woundedness and brokenness and fracturedness in the lives of those I counsel. I didn't differ from those I was counseling, only in the choices that I made, how I was going to deal with the stuff that was very similar to theirs. R.D. Laing, a great existential psychiatrist, said, and I paraphrase, he said, quote, "Therapy is the process where two people meet and one person is judged to be sane by common consent. I found that so true and still do. The truth of Christianity is that we are all, if you will, insane. And it is in relationship with Christ or participation in Christ and his participation in us, we are made sane or whole or complete." There's a great Christian record. I love country western music. Or it's not Christian record, it's a country western song. That the title is God is great, beer is good, and people are crazy. And I laugh every time I think about that. And it's true on some levels. And grace, what grace is that in the midst of our condition of sin, brokenness, fracturedness, incompleteness, or woundedness, Jesus comes. And he loves us into being really human, redeeming from the state of being our state into being a new creation. What it means to be in the image of God. Once we were this, but now we're this because of him. Grace, I was told by one great bishop, is God's riches at Christ's expense. Grace. God's riches at Christ's expense. It's all right there. Not because we deserve it, but because he loves us and he did it. What we need to do is receive it. It says receive it by faith. Receive it by trusting or having assurance or confidence in God. Hebrews 11:1, another memory verse. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence or the conviction of things not seen. Grace is there. We didn't create it. It is something given to us. We can't give it to ourselves. It's something that somebody else gives to us. When we give ourselves grace, it's really giving ourselves an excuse. We're not made to do that, but God has it right there. We're made to be whole, and we receive it. That's what faith is. We don't make God love us, nor can we make God not love us. We don't make God forgive us or make God not forgive us. We receive by faith those things that we cannot see that God has already done in Christ. We need to take the posture of Mary, I think, and John, and dwell at the foot of the cross and look upon his face on that crucifix, and you'll know grace. The experience of grace is experienced by every biblical character. As a spiritual discipline this Lent, I've been reading through the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And there's several themes that run through those stories, but most importantly is the incredible love that God has for the people of Israel. I tell it the first 5 books are the story of God's favorite dysfunctional family. But there's a theme there that runs on how God uses very weak and very broken people. I mean, really incredibly broken people. But yet he continues to love this stick-necked people whose heart grows hard over and over again. But it's out of these people, out of this group of people called the Israelites, the Jewish people, comes Jesus. God is using us. But more importantly, as I look back on my life, I can see, and I think all of us would be able to see, even in our darkest moments, of which I'm now ashamed of mine, and God was there loving us. That's grace. And it's grace that saves us. Receive it. Help us, Lord, to receive the grace that you have for us. And to live in that grace, knowing that when we run up in a circumstance or against opposition, you'll give grace to that person or group of people as well. Teach us to love by drawing into your love. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.